Here's the last lesson of chapter 15, everything leading up from the Mexican-American War, acquisition of more territory, stirring up the slave issue, and things coming to a peak here by the end of the 1850s and the decade. 3 essential questions. Leave yourself some space on the left-hand side. Write them down. What's the significance of the election to 1860, the beginning of the Civil War? What role did the theory of states' rights play in the outbreak of the Civil War? And what evidence can you find in some primary documents that we look at here? Let's say the Declaration of Independence. We're just going to point to that one that the South used to justify secession. You're going to do that with a partner in a little bit, and also look at what Lincoln's arguments were against secession in a primary document here toward the end. Election of 1860, probably the most important election in all of U.S. history. Slavery splits the Democratic Party in two. A northern section has particular views on slavery. A southern section has particular views on slavery. They get together in a big convention. They can't agree on anything. They leave. They form their own conventions. They appoint their own candidates. Stephen Douglas, John C. Breckinridge, who vowed to uphold slavery, of course, from the South. And then there was another party that popped in here that was going to further split down the vote. Last time we had a four-way kind of election like this was 1824 and Andrew Jackson, if you remember all those favorite sons. The Union Party took no position on slavery. Not a real help at a time when slavery seems to be the only thing anybody's talking about. The election of 1860 and the Republican Party platform, and of course you saw Lincoln on the previous one there, pre-Beard. It's important to understand what the Republican Party is about. Their platform, a set of goals, what they run on in their campaign. One, most important thing of the 5 years, slavery is going to be left where it existed, but it's going to be excluded from the territories. We're not going to take your slaves away, but it can't expand, right? Right? Response, reaction, and formed because of this Kansas-Nebraska Act. 2, protective tariff for northern industrialists. Sounds familiar, right? Go back in history. Republican Party, what's the heritage of that particular party? Whigs, largely of the North. National Republicans of the North, offshoot of the Federalists prior to that died after the War of 1812 because of their disloyalty and their lack of support for the war effort. Un-American, unpatriotic, secessionist type tone that they had, ironically. Now it's the South. So this is great for northern industrialists. This is good for jobs, American jobs. We've talked about the tariff numerous times. There's also an element of protect America from immigrants. There's, though, in the Republican Party, a rejection of the know-nothing goal to restrict immigrants and keep America for Americans, whatever that means, for Americans that were there. And they're all about no limitation on the rights of immigrants. Industrialists back here love a great supply of workers. That means they don't have to pay a lot. There's a lot of competition amongst workers, and let them come on in. That's a great thing. The party platform also had a plan to unite the country through the development and establishment of a Pacific Railroad. It's not going to be called that yet, but they passed an act in 1862 called the Pacific Railway Act, and it is planning to build a road here, and this is in the middle of the Civil War. Take note, we are going to grow and expand while the Civil War is being fought, connect the two sides, and it's going to be in the North. Great for industry. This is going to be the backbone of the second industrial revolution that's going to be spurred here by the Civil War and grow significantly in the last half of the 19th century. And internal improvements, canals, roads, use tariff money, federal money to build those things to connect the country. Remember Henry Clay and the American system. Here's what it looks like. You could maybe do a little bit of a summary left side review or something, find a visual of that visual and paste that into your notebook. They're all about that. Again, that connection to that Northern Federalist Whig attitude that we should use government's power and enact laws that help grow the economy and connect the country. It's big. It's geographically huge. We've got to have that in order to keep ourselves connected. Free homesteads into the West for farmers and our growing population. This is going to be coming into a reality. If you want to write down, if you would, the Homestead Act of 1862, the same year as the Pacific Railway Act being passed as well. Literally free 160 acres if you can live there for about 5 years, make it a productive farm, it's yours. Or for something really incredibly cheap, but a lot of times it was free. Get out there in the plains, encourage people to go where nobody really wanted to go, where farming is kind of tough. Talk about that a little bit later. Election of 1860, its impact and results. Southerners really were concerned about the Republican Party platform we just talked about here, and that a victory of the Republicans would lead to slaves being more rebellious because they're going to hear about what the Republican Party is about, maybe more slave revolts, things like that. And in this election, as you can see by the map, Lincoln wins a clear majority of all the northern states. Every single northern state without and banning slavery is won by Lincoln, and southern states talk secession. And we're talking and claiming they would secede if Lincoln wins. Notice that in the South, we've got things divided up. Breckinridge for slavery. Mr. Stephen Douglas of Illinois didn't get his state. Lincoln won his state. And he gets Missouri. Bell gets some of these middle ground states. Notice the middle ground states are kind of a little bit different here in how they voted compared to the rest of the Deep South. Remember intensity of slavery, the intensity of what's grown there, cash crops, cotton, economy, kind of drives political actions and political thinking. Notice the difference here. Remember we said layers of thinking and action. So this is significant. We are officially here in this election a country of regional political parties. What was included in the platform of the Republican Party in the election of 1860, the most important thing is, again, that slavery should be left where it existed, but be excluded from the territories. Do not ever answer a question about what the Republicans wanted with one that says they wanted to abolish slavery. That is not it. That was a crazy, scary thing that would for sure bring disunion and secession and chaos and war. So that's not what they're speaking about, although it's going to come based on events and based on things developing during the war. So there are some attempts at compromise here. This is the flag of South Carolina. The Republicans promised again not to disturb slavery where it was, but Southerners really distrust this based on the long history of federal action trying to limit and talk in the North of trying to limit slavery, the Wilmot Proviso, Harper's Ferry, raising the tariffs, all of that kind of thing. That, of course, is a very bad thing for the South, right? We've been with the tariff issue before in the 1820s and 1830s, bringing about secession nearly. Henry Clay saved the day back then, but it's gone too far here. December 20th, 1860, just weeks after the election of Lincoln. He's not in Washington, D.C. yet. He hasn't even been sworn in as president, not until March of 1861. Annotate that for yourself. South Carolina secedes, and is the first to secede. Other states are debating it. There is an attempt to compromise and a proposal to compromise with something called the Cittenden Compromise, and that guy by the name of Henry Clay had passed away in about, I think, 1852. His replacement was a guy by the name of Crittenden from Kentucky, also coming up with a proposal to bring back the 3630 line that was nullified by Dred Scott, basically, in that Supreme Court decision, and everything below it would be slave and everything above it would be free. However, what would happen with California? We're going to split California free up here and slave down here. I'm not sure Californians would be okay with that, but there comes the issue of what the political party, the Republican political party, was running on and what their goals and what they said they were going to do. And the Republicans said, we're not going to go with this compromise. Forgive my R misspelling there, add that. They reject the compromise. In that they ran on the idea and people voted for the idea that, and for Lincoln as president, that we were not going to allow slavery to expand. And clearly this would allow slavery to expand without a vote of the people. And this would be free. And so this was not acceptable. And the whole idea was that, should we break up the government that was just established through the election based on, giving in to the ones we have beaten? Makes no sense. Then there'd be no point in having an election. People made their choice. You got to go with the choice. Southern leaders responded very strongly. As you can see here, no power can save the Union now. We spit on every plan for compromise. There really was not much there for compromise and any push for it at all. And here we can see a cartoon that shows the Republican Party platform down this person's hand, right? And people who are trying to force and push compromise down the Republican Party's throat. This in the old days would be what a pill kind of looked like, kind of like a gumball. And it says here, Cittenden Compromise. Petition of some numbers of people that are saying we should sign it to keep the Union together. Constitutional remedy. Cittenden Compromise didn't happen. And the Republicans had lockjaw. which is actually a medical disease, a condition, a disease, but you can't open your jaws. So the Confederacy starts to form soon after the secession of South Carolina, February 1861. Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia secede as well. Notice these are in the very deep South where cotton and slavery is most intense. They form the Confederate States of America even before, note this, before Lincoln becomes president, and Buchanan is just sitting there saying there's not much I can do. Jefferson Davis is chosen as president. Here's the first wave of secession. What brings about the second wave of secession is important. What's going on here is important. Note this on your map. Important, important, important. Toward the end, when we're done with the video here, make sure that you read the Declaration of Independence and underline some phrases that are in your notes in that copy and snippet of the Declaration of Independence that the South would use to justify, say, this is why we can secede from the Union. Find a couple in there. You're going to find at least one really strong one, maybe two or three others that could help support that argument why they can leave the Union. Justifying secession, here it is. Theory of the compact. The compact theory was a theory that, and the Constitutional Convention after the Articles of Confederation were considered to be disastrous, that the states agreed to get in, so therefore, if it's not working anymore, they can choose to leave. The compact theory. This is that democratic Southern, strongly in the South, Southern concept of what the convention was all about. The Declaration of Independence also was argued as giving them the power to do that, to leave. The concept of government given by the people. See if you can find that phrase and other phrases that might support things. The Constitution again, with that Constitutional Convention, was a contract between the states and that the national government over time, and now with the Republican Party running things and with what their goals are, they don't represent Southern interests at all, so therefore things have been violated, the contract has been violated, the Fugitive Slave Act was not going to be enforced probably very well under the Republicans, and they felt it hadn't been recently either, and that the states, Southern states, should have equal access and rights in the territories as Northern states. Thus, they have the right to leave the Union. The reaction, many Southerners welcomed secession. Church bells were ringing. There were parades in the streets. Others did voice some concern. In the North, it's kind of mixed. The abolitionists would say, let them go. It's an evil institution, an evil society. We can't fit together at all in any way. We don't have anything in common. And others in the Union would say, you just can't leave whenever you want. That's chaos. Why have a government in the Constitution at all? Robert E. Lee, who will run and control and basically be the top dog here in the East in the Civil War, was very concerned about it, fearful of it, that it was going to be a calamity, was actually asked by Lincoln to lead the Union armies, but he said, no, I have to stick with my state despite my fears. And Lincoln, in all of this, argued, again, forgive my typo there, go ahead and type in, write down an R, argued the question was really whether government should be run by the minority and break up the government whenever they choose. That just can't be. That's a recipe for chaos. If you remember the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists, what they fear, Anti-Federalists, Southerners, liberty, rights, states' rights, 10th Amendment, that kind of thing. Republicans, Federalists, in their history and their thinking, chaos has to be avoided. You have to have stability. That's their biggest fear, chaos. One versus the other. It's still showing up here. Waiting for a new president, again, Buchanan's hanging around, not doing too much. That's illegal, but really felt like he had no power or way of doing anything and didn't want to do anything that would upset what's going on already even more and make it worse for the new president. And Lincoln just waits. He gets many death threats even before the election, before the results were known. And after, he was definitely getting death threats, and he was kind of snuck into Washington, D.C. Story says he was actually perhaps even disguised as a woman at some point to get into Washington, D.C. alive. And he is inaugurated on March 4th, 1861, with a country that is in pieces. Spoke directly to the seceding states. He had a strong voice, tough speech, but as well a tone of peace and togetherness. Secession is not going to be permitted. The Union is perpetual, and he will hold federal property like forts and military installations that are in the South. That is federal land. It is not state land. It is not a possession of this new Confederacy, which he doesn't even recognize. I will enforce the law of the United States and the Constitution, which I have sworn to do. And so in the coming weeks, the next significant event happens, and that is, as an example, of one of many federal forts, military forts, and possessions controlled by southern states, especially in South Carolina. This place called Fort Sumter, which is a fort out in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, has been surrounded, and it is being basically forced to surrender at some point because there's no water getting in, there's no food, there's no supplies, and the commanding officer, a guy by the name of Anderson, sends a message back to Washington, D.C., what do I do? I won't last long here. And Lincoln has a tough situation. What do I do? Lincoln's very good at coming up with third options and other ways of doing things, and he doesn't want to be too aggressive so that it might seem like he's starting a fight, and he doesn't want to seem too weak by giving it up and letting it go to the other side either, and to the militia of South Carolina and to the Confederacy. So he basically sends a message ahead of time and lets it be known that unarmed troops and supplies are coming in, and then in that way the Confederates can decide what they're going to do. It's a not aggressive kind of a ship and a delegation coming down to resupply the fort. And hearing this, Confederate President Jefferson sends a message to the militia at South Carolina to attack the fort, and it's attacked. Now we have the first shot officially fired by the South, and Lincoln can now act with justification because it's the South that is being unruly, acting illegally, revolting. With that, Lincoln then calls for 75,000 volunteers to help bring in and reel in the rebellion, and in response to that, we have a little further north these four states seceding the Union as they see this as a threat to invasion of the South and their sovereignty as states. So the Confederacy grows to a total of 11 with this event and this action by Lincoln. 11 states total. Make sure you do your map work and you've got them separated out and understood as to what's there. You can go ahead and forget about this question. We're not going to deal with this down here today, but make sure you, at the end, at your last few minutes of the hour here, you answer these questions with the information we have, and that you complete this map activity that is available for you to break down what things look like by 1861 and what brought about this secession and what brought about the secession of these states and what's going on here. These would be called the border states. Make sure you identify, highlight, color them, separate them out in your mind. They're important. We'll talk more about them a little bit later. Make hay, make use of your time, get things done, and have a good day.